All right, guys, we're going to focus today on summarizing fiction text, and you should have your practice thinking map up and ready to type on. And we have a practice rubric as well. So this is how you're going to be scored. There are 5 possible points. We want to make sure that our summary introduces the text. So we need to include the title, author, and genre. We know that authors and titles always get capitalized, and titles actually get italicized. That's that slanted I, so your words should be slanted. When we summarize the key literary elements next, we want to make sure we include the setting, and we talk about the protagonists and any key supporting characters as well. We want to talk through the plot, talking about the central challenge. We kind of call that the conflict, and key events to the resolution. And then we want to talk about, based on what we know so far about the story, the author, and the genre, what we might think of the author's theme or message. So if we're producing a summary, we want all of those parts. Objective means that we should be able to find it in the text. It is no opinions, and subjective is including our opinion. So what we think is the author's message or theme, we're coming up with that. That's our claim based on what our evidence was that we learned in the story. Okay, so that equals a proficient answer for 5 points. In my thinking map, I already started filling out some things I already know. Our title is Heat, our author is Mike Lupica, our genre is fiction. The setting where the story takes place, I know so far it's in New York. He's at the ball field a lot. I think it's present day because everything they've talked about so far could have happened today. They talk about the apartment, and they're near Yankee Stadium. So I'm kind of getting a feel for where it's located. Michael is one of our main characters, our protagonist most likely. He is the pitcher, and he's the youngest in the family. Manny is his best friend. He's the catcher. Poppy's the dad. Mr. Minaya is the coach. Carlos, the older brother. And Ellie is that mysterious girl we ran into at the end of chapter 3. Now, keep in mind, you can definitely add some more details as you kind of go through and learn more things about each character, or add to it if we have a new character to add. Plot. So far, what do we know? We know that Michael is a great pitcher, and he wants his team to make it to the Little League World Series. We don't know a whole lot more than that. Maybe he wants to get to know Ellie. I don't know. And then down here it says, do we recommend the book? And we also want to think about that theme, author's theme or message. Okay, so we're going to listen to chapter 4 today. We'll add to it if we need to about some things we learned in chapter 4. Here we go. The following day after Michael came home from church with Mrs. Cora, what had become a Sunday ritual with them, he read all about El Grande's shout out of the Red Sox in the Daily News and the Post. It was a way for him to experience that game all over again, even if he had seen every single pitch of the complete game in which El Grande gave the Red Sox just 4 singles, struck out 10, and walked just 1 batter. It's really good. The stories in the paper reminded everybody that El Grande, who had struggled in April, had not lost a game since his family had finally made it out of Cuba a month before, made it across the waters of the Florida Straits, the way Poppy and Carlos and Michael had 2 years before. So what did we just learn there? We learned that Michael and Carlos and Poppy, they had come from Cuba to the US. And if you kind of follow there, if they came through a boat through the Florida Straits, they did so what we call illegally, right? So they were illegal immigrants. So they're hiding out as well. So they're not US citizens. El Grande's wife and 2 children had made it despite the fact that the Coast Guards had picked them up 20 miles south of Key West in the middle of the night and chased them until dawn with 3 fast boats and a helicopter. All those official persons on the water in the night, Carlos said, smiling and shaking his head as he did, and they had still been unable to catch the spider boat with El Grande's people on it. That wasn't a high-speed chase on the high seas, Carlos had said when they watched the 11 o'clock news that night. That was a police escort. So what he's saying is because El Grande was who he was, he probably got some help to get across by the US police. So kind of having money and being important, do you think that sometimes helps people out? Unfortunately, yeah, right? We know that in our everyday lives. We see that when people have money, they can kind of get away with things that other people can't. Michael had asked what he meant. It was the same with Carlos as it was with Manny Cabrera. Sometimes it was as if they were speaking to Michael in code. They must have been tipped that they had a wife and kids, a star Yankee pitcher on board, Carlos had said. I'm surprised they didn't let that boat go all the way to the Harlem River and drop everybody off a few blocks from the ballpark. Carlos was smiling that night, in a good mood, as he put his arm around his younger brother. We should have told them the night we came that we had the famous pitcher, Miguel Arroyo, on board. So he's comparing El Grande's situation with theirs. They have a famous pitcher too. So maybe they should have got some help. Carlos finally woke up around noon, took a shower, got dressed, and announced he was taking Michael out to lunch at McDonald's. While they were there, both of them having 2 double cheeseburgers with fries and chocolate shakes, Carlos asked when Michael's game was. 2 o'clock, Michael said, against the best team from Westchester. I'm there, Carlos said. Michael shook his head. It's your one day off, he said. You don't have to come and watch me pitch a dopey Little League game. Yes, Carlos said, I do. He had already inhaled his first double cheese and was getting ready to start on his second. How many innings for you today? He asked Michael. The last 4. We got rained out against Eastchester on Thursday, remember? And I only pitched 2 innings last Tuesday when we lost to Fordham Road. They must be good if they can beat you guys, Carlos said. They are, Michael said. Well, I will see you over there, little brother, Carlos said. I haven't gotten to see you pitch 4 straight innings in a month. When they were finished eating, Carlos cleaned up everything, plastic trays and garbage and cups. Maybe he thinks he's still on the job at Hector's, Michael thought, but lately Carlos tried to be very organized about everything, always wanting to show Michael he was in charge, on top of everything, even when it came to bussing a table at what all of Michael's friends called Mickey D's. So it seems like Carlos is really trying to step up and be a good role model and kind of really help take care of his younger brother. Michael knew it was just his brother's way of acting older than he really was, like he was Poppy Jr. When he came back to the table, he told Michael to sit for 1 minute. He had something he wanted to talk about. Sounds serious, Michael said. Did I leave a towel on the floor of my room? Carlos said, you did, slob face, but that's not what I want to talk to you about. Michael waited. Carlos leaned forward, made his fingers into a steeple, and put them under his chin, another grown-up pose of his. I just want to remind you that as you and the other guys on the All-Stars continue to win games, there's going to be more attention drawn to you. Which means, Carlos said, you're going to have to be more careful about what you say, who you say it to. I wonder why he's worried about that. I wonder if it has something to do with them being illegal immigrants. I don't need reminding, Michael said. I know you don't, Carlos said. You're smart, even if you are a slob, but you have to keep it at the front of your brain that the bigger the games, the bigger the spotlight. Carlos made the spotlight sound like one more thing for them to be afraid of. His brother walked him back to the apartment, then told him he had some errands to run. Michael said it was Sunday. He should be resting instead of running errands, especially if he was coming to the game in an hour. Carlos said for him to go rest himself for an hour or so. He'd see him later in the top of the third. Michael faced 13 batters from Westchester South. He struck out 10. I'm going to pause here for a moment because I want you to notice those 3 dots at the top. It's kind of like a nice break in the action. So now we're getting into him being at the baseball field. So we kind of changed settings here in time. Okay. So Michael faced 13 batters from Westchester South. He struck out 10. That's pretty good. Only 3 had a hit or a walk. The Westchester team managed only 1 hit off of him on a little blooper that died in front of Kell at short and then bounced away from him for an infield hit. The only other batter in the play was a little roller, their cleanup hitter, a blonde kid, almost as tall as Michael and looking a lot heavier, hit about halfway to the mound, top of the third. Earlier in the game, the same kid had hit a 3-run homer off Anthony Ferrero. The ball just cleared the left field fence. They were the last runs Westchester would get in the 4-3 loss. The blonde-haired kid didn't like looking foolish and even tried to convince the home plate ump that the dribbler he'd hit back at Michael had ricocheted off his foot first. "It was a foul ball," the kid kept saying in a loud voice until Manny took off his mask and said, "In your dreams, maybe." The blonde kid said, "What's that supposed to mean?" Manny just smiled, trying to let the kid know this wasn't something worth fighting about. "Hey, dude, you did good just getting your bat on the ball. Don't be looking for a do-over." The best comeback the blonde kid, clearly the star of his team, could manage was, "I wasn't talking to you." But Manny was talking to him, and once Manny got started, it was hard, more like impossible for him to stop. He walked out, dug the tip of his spike into the grass about where Michael had picked up the blonde kid's roller. "The way my man is pitching today, this is the same as going deep on his butt." Maybe he is a man," the blonde kid had said. "He throws like one." It occurred to Michael that they were discussing him as if he weren't there. The Westchester kid said, "How old is he anyway?" Uh-oh, we know he's illegal, and if he doesn't have papers, he may not have a birth certificate to show his age, and I wonder if that's a problem, because I know in club sports and things like that in Little League, you have to be a certain age, so that might hurt him. It was, Michael knew, like giving Manny a pitch he could drive. Manny said, 12 years, 2 months, 5 days, and however many hours it was until you were a lucky boy even to touch the best fastball you're ever going to see. The blonde kid dug in good now, said, "He doesn't throw like it, like any 12-year-old I've ever seen." Manny gave the big jerk a smile that seemed to stretch from the Deegan to the subway tracks over River Avenue. "No, he does not." Then he turned his head, spit, and went back to the plate and got into his crouch. In the top of the sixth, trying to make sure the Clippers held on to their one-run lead, Michael had struck out the side on 10 pitches. Of course, the last hitter up turned out to be the blonde kid, whose name, they had heard by then, was Justin. "You can't get any more white bread than being a Justin," Kell had said on the bench when they all heard the Westchester coach call the blonde boy by name. Manny would say later that the one called ball Michael had thrown on Justin, the one with 2 strikes on him, should have been a strike 2, but the ump had taken pity on the poor guy, not wanting to end the game on a punch-out. The ump had come out to clean off home plate after he called the pitch a ball. When he did, according to Manny, he looked up at Justin and in a real quiet voice said, "You better be swinging on the next one, son." Justin did swing from his heels, but Michael blew the ball right by him. Ball game! At that point, Justin threw his bat against the back screen. Seems like he's a pretty sore loser, right? The ump hadn't wasted any time calling out the Westchester coach and telling him that his star was suspended from the next game. The coach said that only happened if you got ejected and that the ump couldn't eject someone when the game was already over. "Watch me," the ump answered. That was when Justin started yelling. As his coach tried to pull him away, the ump immediately pulled out his cell phone. The coach asked who he was calling. "The league commissioner," the ump said. "I want him to hear every word of this." So I guess the league commissioner makes those big decisions and runs the league, huh? That was when Justin finally shut up. At that point, Michael got into line with the rest of the Clippers, shaking hands with the Westchester players, all except Justin, who somehow managed to veer off and head back to his bench just before he got next to Michael, staring hard at him from a distance, still acting more ticked off at Michael than he was at the ump, who just clipped him for a game. "He can't be that mad just because I got him out," Michael said to Manny. "He must think it's impossible for anyone his own age to make him look like that much of a girl." "Hey, that's not cool. Girls can be good athletes too." "Hey," Michael said, "not so loud. We have a girl, remember, and she's good." Glad Michael said that. They did. Maria Cuellar, whose parents were Puerto Rican, was the second fastest player on their team after Kell. She played second base, could play third or short if she had to, and could hit. "I don't think of Maria as a girl," Manny said. "I think of her as one of us." "Really?" Michael said. "I watch you sometimes watching her, and you don't seem to look at her the way you do other players and the other infielders." Manny turned to Michael, no expression on his face whatsoever, his voice completely calm, and said, "Shut up about Maria. I bet he likes her." "I'm good with that," Manny said, "just so we're clear." Mr. Minaya gathered them out in the right field for a few minutes, the way he always did after games, went over what he liked about what they'd done that day, what he didn't like. He told them what he told them after every game, that the object was for them to have fun, but to learn something every single time they went out there. You never know what thing you learn might make the difference between making it to Williamsport and watching the games from your sofa, he said. Williamsport is where the Little League World Series is. It had already reached the point in the season, Michael and his teammates knew, where Mr. Minaya wasn't really interested in whether or not they were having fun. That was just his cover story. He wanted to make it to the World Series as much as any kid on his team, maybe more. Sometimes when Mr. Minaya got going about the World Series, he sounded a lot like Poppy, which meant he made Williamsport, Pennsylvania, that ballpark you'd see on television with happy parents in the stands and no highways in the distance. Sound like baseball heaven? Did you hear me, Michael? Or were you in Williamsport already? I was actually, Michael said. Sorry, Coach. He was acting as if anybody needed a ride. I was asking if anybody needed a ride over to Crotona Park on Tuesday night, Mr. Minaya said. Michael looked down at his old baseball shoes, that hole in the toe of his left one, and as he said, I could use a ride. There was a pause before Mr. Minaya said, Can't your father bring you? Michael, trying not to look nervous, said, No. He's not back from Florida? Michael shook his head. I wondered why he hadn't called me back. It's still just Carlos and me, Michael said, but Mrs. Cora looks out for us. Mr. Minaya said he would swing by and pick Michael up at 4:30. Michael said he'd be out front. Mr. Minaya said, I hope your uncle gets better soon. It would be a shame if your father misses our first playoff games after missing the whole regular season. Michael just nodded and told Mr. Minaya he would see him on Tuesday. Told Manny he could call him later. Picked up his glove and bat and started walking fast in the direction of the stadium. Then he was running, jogging at first, but then sprinting, just wanting to get home to the apartment, afraid to look back, afraid they might still be watching him. He didn't want Mr. Minaya or his teammates to see him crying about the father that had been dead since May. All right, so we heard some really important things to add on here. Let me go back. I want to make sure I add Mrs. Cora, because she does take care of the boys at the apartment. Older lady takes care of boys. And I will, you can manipulate yours so your words and your typing fits, just so long as you can read it. And some things that we learned that were important in this section, we wrote they came to Cuba from the US and that Poppy has died. So in May, he has already passed, and that's important to remember and to be in our summary. All right, so you will be creating a summary today while you are reading your text. So I'm going to be taking this and coming up with a summary for you to see for our writing portion.